Ses geliyor mu?
Evet, ses geliyor.
Tamam, çok teşekkürler. Yes. Ses geliyor mu?
Amfide eko var yalnız.
Yes. So, yes. School is looking. Then in January. Hadi. Yani şimdi nasıl sesiniz? Daha mı iyi?
Yes. So I think we should start it. Shall we actually? Is there any problem?
Ziyaret için. Do you have presentation? Can you use your computer?
Just to give the image.
Yes. That's weird.
Okay. Where should I, can I go from here? Well, I just want to introduce.
This can take.
Okay, we'll use that. Okay. So, shall we go? Sure. Yes. So, welcome everybody. The first time I speak to a camera. It's strange, but welcome to the second half of the workshop on Byzantine music that started this morning. And before leaving the floor, giving the floor to Professor Botanakis, who is going to chair today's first session, it is my pleasure to introduce the Dean of the Faculty of Economics, Administrative and Social Sciences, Professor Rafael Kurenak, who is going to give a welcome speech to all of you following us from Zoom and live on YouTube.
Well, you'll be relieved to hear that it's not a speech, it's just a welcome. And as you know, a happening university is a happy university. And none of us were all that happy for a long while now, because nothing was happening and we were all secluded in our corners, with no human contact and no scholarly touch that we so crave. So it's wonderful that we are back to being a normal university, and I'd like to thank all of our guests for coming here, being here, be that from abroad or next door from Hacettepe or elsewhere, and to all of our students, all of our faculty, and our administrative assistants who work so hard to make sure that this is working out flawlessly and smoothly, in person and online and Zoom and YouTube and wherever you might be. And of course, those of you who are online, you're also welcome. I would in particular like to thank the History Department, its chair, Mehmet Hoca, and most of all, Luca Hoca, who made all of this possible. It's great that we are back to being the university that we like to be, and it's great that we're thinking about the sounds of the land we're living on. So with that, I welcome you all and wish you the best and hope that this is first of many. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all attendants for being here tonight, so digitally, virtually. I would like to invite, first of all, Professor Sejani and Imaydin to present the paper by Professor Dimitris Terzakis. Sejan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonios. Welcome, everyone. It has been a pleasure participating in this wonderful symposium. So, first of all, we owe actually much gratitude. We would like to express.
Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Is there a problem?
Sorry?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
I think, yeah, my microphone is actually open. So we owe much gratitude, and we would like to express our sincere thanks to the president of the Bilkent University, Professor Dr. Abdullah Atalar, for his recognition and support. We extend our thanks to the Dean of the Faculty of Economics, Administrative and Social Sciences of Bilkent University, Professor Refet Gürkaynak, for his generous hospitality. And this faculty was also my home for a long time ago as a student. We are utterly grateful for the kind and perpetual support of the chair of the Department of History, Professor Dr. Mehmet Kalpaklı. And we have been extremely lucky to have the support and collaboration of Hellenic Mediterranean University, Crete, and Dr. Antonios Botanakis. Not the least, the faculty members of Hacettepe University, Department of Music Theory and Department of Art History, Center for Late Antique and Byzantine Studies at Koç University. We thank them for their kind and prospective support. I would like to take this opportunity also to express my sincere gratitude and respect to the exceptional organizing and supporting team for their ambitious commitment in realizing this mini symposium and workshop. But also on behalf of the organizing team, I would like to thank to all our speakers for their invaluable contribution. Before moving to Professor Dimitris Terzakis' talk, unfortunately, he will not be here via Zoom as well because he had a surgery recently, but I will still deliver his speech. He sent us an audio recording, so we'll hear him and we'll see what he has said in his speech. So a short talk, and then we'll continue directly with Professor Terzakis' keynote lecture. The hypothesis is the supremely idealized Renaissance conception of intellectually and artistically being reborn, starting with the writings of Giorgio Vasari, 600 years before, leads to a widely stereotyped and prejudiced evaluation and puts a veil on the reception and understanding of the Byzantine art and culture within the general framework of art history and cultural history, consequently placing the latter one inferior to the Renaissance by defining it as a cultural miracle. The historical period between roughly 1300 and 1570s in Italy is commonly labeled as the Renaissance, a term brought out by the contemporaries of the period, the humanists. The sentimental yearning towards the golden age of antiquity and Roman tradition, together with the remodeling of the self by the humanists themselves, are the basic elements of this rhetoric. This grand narrative of the Renaissance, which has its roots in the 16th century, 17th century onwards, this traditional rhetoric was widely acknowledged and further refined by the historians and thinkers, ultimately resulted in disparaging of the art of Byzantium. The Renaissance was accepted as the sole beginning of a new era of the human intellect and art. Historians and the cultural historians alike have a quarrel about the traditional view for over 2 decades. Moreover, in the 18th and 19th centuries, this narrative is promoted with utter sentiment and nostalgia. In the meantime, thinkers of the Enlightenment harshly criticized Byzantium in their writings. A well-known example would be Hegel. I believe there is a need to ponder on new questions for a new discourse and revise this grand narrative of the Renaissance, but also break up with the teleological line of thinking that obscured Byzantium and its culture. There is an overestimation and sublimation of a local event and an underestimation of a culture with its immense artistic and intellectual baggage. Elements of visual culture from the Byzantine sphere and West European alike need to be readdressed and reincarnated within a social anthropological model, together with an interdisciplinary approach with its gravity lying on the cultural history, but not in control of traditional Renaissance rhetoric. Likewise, the Byzantine music suffers in twofold. First, it's a largely neglected field within Byzantine studies, although it's an essential part of its culture. Secondly, it's unnoticed and nearly forgotten by its Western counterparts. So today and tomorrow, our hope is to pave the way to better comprehend and to realize Byzantine music from different positions. Our keynote speaker, composer Dimitri Terzakis, addresses diligently the points mentioned above, and further he elaborates the topic by providing his music as well. I hope that the arguments I tried to convey serve as an inspiration for further discussions about the subject. I wish you all an exciting and inspiring symposium. Please stay healthy and enjoy the program. Thank you for your attention. Before moving to the keynote lecture by Professor Terzakis, I would like to recall today's afternoon's program and also tomorrow's program. There's a possibility of two speakers not being able to participate in today's session. So today we have 4 speakers, and it's about theoretical connections. Tomorrow we will have the second part of the Reading Byzantine Notation workshop. And in the afternoon, we have a starting time at 4 o'clock with visual witnesses, Antonios Botanakis, and it continues with contemporary influences. And we have 3 more beautiful lectures on that topic. And finally, we have a concert, both sides of the sea. First, we have Nevin Şahin and Cenk Güray from Hacettepe University, and we have the maestros of the Psaltic Art Athens following their performance. So now I would like to continue with Professor Terzakis' talk. I will now start playing his voice. Thank you.
İyi akşamlar, bayanlar, baylar.
Just a quick review of his biography, and then I will continue playing his voice again.
İyi akşamlar, bayanlar, baylar. Da ich gegen meinen Willen die freundliche Einladung nach Ankara zu kommen nicht folgen konnte, schicke ich meine Stimme. Ich hoffe, sie mich gut vertreten wird. Wenn Sie mal Zeit und Lust haben, empfehle ich Ihnen ein Experiment.
Unfortunately, we cannot hear the sound.
Herrschaft zwischen Konstantinopel und Rom. Im Jahr 1054 erfolgt das berühmte Schisma, nämlich die Trennung der Ost- und der Westkirche. Nun, die beiden sind jetzt erbitterte Feinde. Im Jahr 1453 fällt Konstantinopel, sie wird durch die Türken erobert und damit verschwindet der große Rivale. Und wie es immer in der Geschichte der Fall ist, der Besiegte ist immer der Böse, der Ungerechte. Byzanz wird weiterhin als ein rückständiger Staat erwähnt, mit Intrigen, politischen Morden und so weiter, als ob es etwas nicht auch im Westen gäbe. Aber das ist eine Regel der Geschichte. Wenn Sie diese Bücher Musikgeschichte umblättern, Sie werden Folgendes sehen. Der Autor beginnt mit der Musik der Antike, relativ kurzerhand, und dann macht er einen großen geografischen, zeitlichen Sprung in den Westen und beginnt er mit der Gregorianik. Ja, als ob es inzwischen nichts gäbe. Und woher stammt die Gregorianik? Ganz einfach. Die Antwort ist der Besiegte, die Kultur des Besiegten, die aus der Oberfläche verschwinden muss. So haben wir mit einer einseitigen Darstellung der Entwicklung der Musik in Europa. Dazu kommt die Propaganda der kolonialistischen Politik, wonach wir sind die Zivilisierten, der Rest der Welt sind die Barbaren. Also wir bringen euch unsere hohe Kultur, da geben sie uns als Gegenleistung eure Diamanten und was sie alles an Schätzen haben. Als ich 1965 nach Köln ging, um bei Bernd Alles Zimmermann zu studieren, bin ich mit dieser Dogmatik konfrontiert. Ich wusste noch früher als Student in Griechenland, dass das neue Deutschland das Zentrum der neuen Musik ist. Ich wusste, es wurde ja propagiert, dass das neue Deutschland im Gegensatz zu den finsteren Zeiten des Nationalsozialismus jetzt aufgeschlossen sei. Unter anderem die Künstler sind frei zu arbeiten, wie sie wollen. Nun, das Erste habe ich sofort festgestellt, als ich zum ersten Mal die berühmte Darmstädter Ferienkurse für neue Musik besuchte. Tatsächlich, da gab es Leute aus allen möglichen Nationalitäten. Aber als ich die Werke hörte, stellte ich fest, dass alle gleich gesungen haben. Ob das Werk von einem Chinesen oder von einem Portugiesen stammte, das klang klar uniformiert. Und dann wusste ich, dass ich mit einer eisernen Dogmatik konfrontiert werden musste, wonach, wenn ihr Künstler niemand von will, dann brauchen wir euch nicht. Das war ein großes Dilemma. Sollte ich so tun, Dann wusste ich, dass ich eine Zeit lang Aufführungen meiner Werke hätte, aber wenn die Mode damals die serielle Technik vorbei war, wäre ich auch verschwunden. Ich habe mich entschlossen, meine Muttersprache, oder richtiger gesagt, aus meiner musikalischen Muttersprache zu schöpfen. Dazu hat mich auch der ermuntert. Und was war diese musikalische Muttersprache? Ganz einfach. Die griechische Volksmusik und die griechische Kirchenmusik, die sogenannte byzantinische Musik. Da habe ich meinem Großvater vieles zu verdanken, der immer mich mit in die Kirche nahm. Und so konnte ich die byzantinischen Gesänge hören. Ich konnte den Charakter und die Möglichkeiten dieser Musik saugen, sozusagen, was mir dann sehr geholfen hat. Konkret. In der neuen Musik, damals wie auch heute, ist die Melodie verboten. Ja, dachte ich, also die Melodie ist verboten, aber mein Gott, der liebe Gott hat mich zum Melodiker gemacht. Warum soll ich auf eine Fähigkeit verzichten, allein weil die Leute im Westen es verbieten? Klammer auf. Ich erwähne Deutschland, weil nach dem Krieg Deutschland zum größten musikalischen Markt der Welt entwickelt hat. Welches andere Land hat über 80 Oper, unzählige Orchester, unzählige Kammermusikensembles, jede Teilstadt einen eigenen Radiosender hat. So. Und dann sagte ich zu mir, Dimitri, pass mal auf. Du wirst aus deiner Quelle schöpfen. Und hier betone ich, nicht im Sinne der Imitation. Ich habe nie imitiert, sei es die byzantinische Musik, sei es griechische Volkslieder. Ich habe nur Elemente, wenn Sie wollen, technische Elemente benutzt, die ich dann weiterentwickelt habe. Konkret. Das nicht temperierte Tonsystem. Das nicht temperierte Tonsystem ermöglicht die Gestaltung von sehr flexiblen melodischen Linien mit Nuancen von Mikrointervallen, die keine Färbung sind. Mit anderen Worten, sehr flexiblen melodischen Linien, die im Westen teilweise verloren gegangen sind. Warum? Als im Westen erste Experimente der Stimmigkeit begannen, stellte man fest, dass die melodischen Linien vereinfacht werden müssen, damit der ganze Klang deutlich klingt. Man hat also die melodischen Linien vereinfacht, obwohl sie es in der Gregorianik gab. Aber es war eine richtige Entscheidung. Während man im Westen die Mehrstimmigkeit entwickelte, seit dem ungefähr 10. Jahrhundert, fuhren die Byzantiner vor, die Einstimmigkeit zu entwickeln, die im 11., 12., 13. Jahrhundert ihren Höhepunkt erreicht hat. Es war natürlich ein Problem, nicht temperierte Musik im Westen zu schreiben. Warum? Erstens, weil Intervalle wahrzunehmen. Zweitens, weil die Interpreten nicht gewohnt waren, nicht temperiert zu spielen bzw. zu singen. Denn, das wissen wir ja, der Student am besten muss lernen, möglichst sauber zu intonieren. Das Schönheitsideal und Höhen und die fließenden Linien sind dadurch im Westen verloren gegangen. Also unter anderem hatte ich diese Probleme und natürlich musste ich auch mit Gegenreaktionen rechnen, die es auch gab. Immerhin, hartnäckig wie ich bin, habe ich angefangen, Gedanken zu machen, wie man diese Schätze des Ostens in den Westen verpflanzen kann. Das erste Stück, was ich so komponierte, war ein kurzes Stück für Chor a cappella mit dem Titel Ikos. Es wurde 1970 im Rahmen des Festes der Internationalen Gesellschaft für Neue Musik in Basel uraufgeführt und es hatte Erfolg. Das hat mich ermutigt. Und dann fing ich an, in diese Richtung zu arbeiten. Ein Beispiel ist mein Stück Stimmen für Solo-Violine. Es besteht aus 3 Sätzen, wobei ich in jedem Satz mit einer anderen Stimmung arbeite. Stimmen der Nacht, Stimmen der Dämonen, Stimmen der Feen. Sie hören dieses Stück jetzt gespielt vom Saschko Gavrilov.
In dieser frühen Phase meine melodischen Linien, die ich Mikromellos nannte, bewegten sich in einem relativ engen Tonraum. Dann habe ich angefangen mit Tetrachorden zu arbeiten. Und aus dem Tonsystem der Antike, das gibt es auch in der byzantinischen Musik, das sogenannte Systema zu benutzen. Was ist Systema? Systema sind die Kombinationen von verschiedenen Tetrachorden. Dieses Prinzip habe ich weiter erweitert, indem ich nicht nur Tetrachorden des gleichen Tongeschlechts kombinierte, sondern auch Tetrachorde verschiedenen Tongeschlechtern, also Diatonik, Chromatik, Enharmonik. Und dadurch sind andere Skalen entstanden. Ein Beispiel, eine Kombination, ein diatonisches Tetrachord und einem chromatischen. Aber dann geht es weiter. Das chromatische Tetrachord in der byzantinischen Musik enthält bekanntlich in der Mitte eine übermäßige Sekunde. Das ist das charakteristische Intervall. Ich habe das erweitert, indem ich die übermäßige Sekunde auch zu Beginn, am Ende des Tetrachordes, setzte. Also ein diatonisches Tetrachord mit einem chromatischen Tetrachord, das mit einer übermäßigen Sekunde endet. Dadurch entstehen andere ungewöhnliche Gravitationszentren. Als ich diesen Weg entdeckte, gab es für mich das bekannte Dilemma der abendländischen Musik, nämlich Tonalität oder Atonalität nicht. Denn die Atonalität, meiner Meinung nach, hat kein natürliches Fundament. Warum? Der Mensch nimmt bekanntlich relativ wahr. Wir sehen relativ, wir riechen relativ,
Wir hören relativ. Was heißt das? Wir hören immer in Bezug auf einen zentralen Ton, die sogenannte Tonika. So. So habe ich angefangen, meine Melodien immer mit Tetrachorden und mit Tetrachordkombinationen, also Systema, zu gestalten. Dann eine weitere Frage war, gut, solange die Musik einstimmig ist, ist kein Problem. Wie ist es aber, wenn man für eine größere Besetzung schreibt, sagen wir mal für Orchester? Dann, wenn die Melodien chorisch klingen, dann ist das Problem nicht nur die Intonation der Mikrointervallen, sondern auch der Wahrnehmung. Stellen Sie sich vor, eine Gruppe von Violinen, die unisono eine Melodie spielen. Die Intonation ist fast unmöglich. Deswegen hatte ich immer eine Bemerkung gemacht, wobei ich erkläre, dass es nicht auf die genaue Intonation ankommt. Im Gegenteil, Schwankungen und winzige Unterschiede sind erwünscht. Eins meiner, sagen wir mal, erfolgreichen Orchesterstücke dieser Zeit ist Troppi für Orchester. Sie hören es in einer Aufnahme mit dem Orchester des Südwestfunks Baden-Baden unter der Leitung von Peter Oetwisch.
Es hat mich immer gereizt, für Stimme zu komponieren. Dann hier gab es andere Probleme, nicht nur die technischen Probleme der Intonation und so weiter, sondern die Realität unserer Zeit. Und die Realität unserer Zeit heißt, das Lied ist, oder der Liedbetrieb ist hoffnungslos erstarrt. Hört man Liederabende, dann gibt es immer Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, Strauss. Das heißt, nicht nur das romantische Klavierlied, sondern das deutsche Klavierlied. Wunderbare Lieder.
von Mussorgsky, Britten, Debussy und so weiter hört man so gut wie nie. Die Gattung Lied hat mich immer gereizt, auch von meiner Jugend. Also, dann musste ich gegen diese Dogmatik kämpfen. Habe ich getan. Und ich habe mehrere Lieder komponiert und ich habe immer versucht, mich vom Riesenschatten des deutschen romantischen Klavierliedes zu befreien. Ich möchte hier ein Beispiel bringen, ein Lied mit dem Titel Tell Me, nach einem Gedicht, einem wunderschönen Gedicht von Emily Bronte. Denn Emily Bronte ist weltberühmt mit ihrem Roman Sturmhöhe, aber ihre Gedichte sind wenig bekannt. So habe ich also einen Zyklus komponiert und dieses Tell Me wurde in München uraufgeführt. Also hören Sie es und ich hoffe, es wird Ihnen gefallen. Ich habe vorher gesagt, dass ich als Quelle meine eigene Tradition benutze. Und diese Tradition ist auch die byzantinische Musik. Klammer auf. Was ist die byzantinische Musik, so wie wir sie heute kennen? Es gibt zwei Lager von Forschern, die sehr unterschiedlich sind. Während Egon Welles behauptet, dass die byzantinische Musik mit dem Fall Konstantinopels endet, behaupten die griechischen Forscher, dass sie weiter gepflegt wurde, wie auch die anderen Künste des Byzanz, beispielsweise die Ikonenmalerei oder die Architektur. Die Ikonenmalerei wurde weiterhin praktiziert und in der Zeit der türkischen Herrschaft, also 4 Jahrhunderte immerhin, wurden weiter Kirchen gebaut. Also, was ist die byzantinische Musik? Ist sie griechisch oder türkisch? Wenn Sie mich fragen, das ist mir egal. Was mich interessiert, dass diese Musik für mich eine sehr wichtige Quelle ist. Also ich bin kein Musikwissenschaftler, aber ich erwähne dieses Thema nebenbei. Wir wissen, dass abgesehen von dunklen Phasen dieser Herrschaft, wir wissen, dass die neuen Herrscher, die Türken, tolerant waren. Man erzählt sogar, dass Mohammed seine Hofmusiker bei den Sängern der Hagia Sophia Kirche studieren ließ. Was bedeutet das? Das bedeutet, dass die Kultur nicht zerstört wurde, sondern im Gegenteil, er hat ihre Wichtigkeit erkannt und da er offene Horizonte hatte, wollte einfach diesen Schatz realisieren, auch für seine Musiker. Dieses Thema, die Herkunft der byzantinischen Musik, interessiert mich als Komponisten nicht. Denn was mich interessiert, sind nicht nationale Egoismen, sondern die Realität. Und die Realität ist, dass in der byzantinischen Musik wir eine hochwichtige Musikkultur haben. So. Natürlich habe ich mich mit diesem Thema beschäftigt. Und ich habe natürlich die byzantinische Musik eifrig studiert. Ich konnte sogar Handschriften zum Teil entziffern, aber nicht aus wissenschaftlichem Interesse, sondern aus künstlerischem Interesse. So, damit schließe ich diese Parenthese. Nun zurück nach Köln. Als ich dort ankam, war noch die serielle Musik in Mode, beziehungsweise die postserielle Musik. Dann kamen andere Richtungen, die aleatorische, die Klangfarbenkomposition, die Clusters und. Mir wurde es bewusst, dass wenn ich hinter jeder dieser Mode laufen würde, würde ich auch mit ihrem Tod sterben. Aber das heißt nicht, dass ich alles, was ich dort gehört habe, und das war nämlich viel, ablehne. Da Köln das Zentrum der neuen Musik war, alle Strömungen wurden zunächst in Köln präsentiert. Und so habe ich jede Menge Werke gehört, Komponisten kennengelernt, mit denen ich hochinteressante Gespräche hatte, nämlich mit Stockhausen, Kagel, Ligeti, natürlich mit Zimmermann. Das alles interessiert mich. Aber auf der anderen Seite sah ich, dass diese Musik beim Publikum nicht ankam. Es gab natürlich einen Kreis von Interessenten, den gibt es immer noch. Aber das breite Publikum lehnte diese Musik ab. Ja, ich habe dann philosophiert und dachte, Mensch, warum? Da gibt es schöne Werke. Warum akzeptiert das Publikum sie nicht? Und meine persönliche Antwort, man kann damit einverstanden sein oder nicht, meine persönliche Antwort lautet, weil das Element Melodie verboten ist. Und da die Melodie verboten war, benutzte man, da man ohnehin, die Musik ist eine Zeitkunst, man musste eine Note nach der anderen schreiben, nicht wahr? Man benutzte nur die großen Intervalle. Da entstanden akrobatische melodische Linien, die über der Fähigkeit des Menschen zu speichern waren. Man kann eine Melodie, deren erster Ton im Keller ist, der zweite auf dem Dach des Hauses, die dritte im zweiten Stock. Kein Mensch kann sie speichern. Kann man sie nicht speichern, dann kann man nicht die Entwicklung dieses Materials im Rahmen eines Werkes wahrnehmen. Weil der Mensch in erster Linie horizontal hört. Man hört einen Ton, man hört einen zweiten Ton, den dritten. Und der Mensch ist leider so geschaffen, er kann nur melodische Linien wahrnehmen, die aus kleineren Intervallen bestehen. Sobald eine melodische Linie akrobatisch ist, dann nimmt das Ganze nur statistisch wahr. Also das ist, wenn Sie wollen, meine Erklärung, man kann damit einverstanden sein oder nicht. Aber das habe ich in der Praxis gesehen. Denn in Köln, natürlich habe ich auch minderwertige Werke gehört, aber ich habe auch hochinteressante Werke gehört. Ich kann nicht so einfach die Werke von Boulez, Nono, Stockhausen, Ligeti und so weiter einfach streichen und sagen, Mensch, das ist nichts. Es gibt wunderbare Sachen drin, aber die kann man nicht beim Publikum machen. Also, ich war wirklich in so einer Situation mit immer neuen Problemen. Einerseits, dass ich der ästhetischen Diktat der jeweiligen Mode nicht gehorchte. Andererseits, dass ich mit Elementen arbeite, die das westeuropäische Ohr nicht wahrnehmen kann. Dann auch die praktische Seite, dass es Gegner gab. Es gab auch Leute, also Fachleute, die mich unterstützten. Es waren aber auch Gegner. Und jetzt, interessanterweise, in meinen späten Jahren, stelle ich fest, dass manche, die damals gegen mich waren, jetzt loben meine Richtung. Aber das ist kein neues Phänomen in der Geschichte. Somit also in allen diesen Kontroversen fuhr ich hartnäckig vor, meine eigene Linie weiter zu entwickeln. Es war in Bern, wo ich eine Gastprofessur hatte, dann habe ich mit meinen Studenten dort das Thema Lied, aber überhaupt vokale Musik besprochen. Und dann sagte ich meinen Studenten, Kinder, der Gesang muss nicht unbedingt einen Text als Lage haben. Die Melodie hat die Möglichkeit, Situationen zum Ausdruck zu bringen, ohne die Hilfe eines Textes. Und dann kam ich auf die Idee, eine Reihe von Liedern zu komponieren, ohne Text und ohne Klavierbegleitung. Ich habe sie Lieder ohne Worte genannt und ich hoffe, dass der Kollege Mendelssohn mich entschuldigt, dass ich ihm diesen Titel geklaut habe. Jahre danach habe ich mit der exzellenten Bratschistin Tatjana Masurenko zusammengearbeitet, für die ich mehrere Werke komponiert habe. So viele, sodass mich ein Krieger fragte, ob ich in sie verliebt sei. Ja, habe ich gesagt, ich bin in ihre Kunst verliebt. Und da die Tatjana aus Russland stammt, hat sie, wie ich auch, andere Hörerlebnisse als die Westen. Und eines Tages sagte mir, hör mal, Dimitri, sagte sie, deine Lieder ohne Worte, die lassen sich auch Viola spielen. Meinst du? Ja, sagte sie. Soll ich es mal versuchen? Oh ja, versuch es. Von mir aus, warum nicht? Und dann, eines Tages, hat mir einige vorgespielt. Das fand ich fabelhaft. Die Melodien wirkten fast besser als gesungen. Und natürlich, die Tatjana konnte die Nuancen, die Mikrointervalle, die Flexibilität der melodischen Linien wunderbar spielen. Vielleicht, verehrtes Publikum, sind Sie auch dieser Meinung. Also lassen wir jetzt die Lieder ohne Worte, Fassung für Viola hören, gespielt, von Tatjana Masurenko. dann bin ich dort auch mit der glorreichen Gattung der abendländischen Musik mit dem Streichquartett konfrontiert. Es reizte mich, für diese Besetzung zu komponieren, obwohl ich wusste, dass es unzählige Streichquartette gibt, obwohl ich wusste, dass das Repertoire mit Bela Bartok bzw. Schostakowitsch aufhört. Ich habe 5 Streichquartette komponiert. Und natürlich habe ich die Instrumente nicht chorisch, sondern fast solistisch benutzt. Ich habe sie singen lassen und als Beispiel möchte ich hier das letzte vorführen, nämlich das 5. Streichquartett.
Babacım kalk bakayım, gel yanıma, bir şey söyleyeceğim sana. Gel, bir şey söyleyeceğim sana. Duydun mu?
mein großes Problem Musik. Als Spross einer guten Familie musste ich das obligatorische Französisch und Klavier üben. Ich hatte eine Klavierlehrerin, es war die verstehen sich zu befinden, als die Noten zu sehen. Dann, was mir im Klavier nicht gefiel, war nämlich die temperierte Stimmung, die sehr flexible Linien unmöglich machte. Jahrelang habe ich fürs Klavier nicht komponiert, bis auf Begleitung für Lieder. Und dann die Klaviermusik, die ich damals in Köln hörte, nämlich in erster Linie serielle Musik. Da störte mich wieder, komme ich darauf, das Fehlen der Melodie. Man versuchte, dem Klavier Klangfarben zu entlocken, aber die Möglichkeiten dieses Instruments ist sehr begrenzt. Und dann dachte ich mir eines Tages, also hör mal, Dimitri, das Klavier kann singen. Lass es doch singen und schreibe nicht einen Ton im Keller, einen Ton auf dem Dach und einen Ton in der zweiten Etage. Und so habe ich angefangen, Stücke für Klavier zu komponieren. Zunächst einen Zyklus namens Pensée, 14 kurze Stücke. Ich schlage vor, zum Schluss dieser Veranstaltung, die hoffentlich für Sie nicht langweilig war, 1, 2 Klavierstücke zu hören. Das war's, meine Damen und Herren. Es tut mir leid, dass ich nicht nach Ankara kommen konnte. Ich hoffe, dass es eines Tages diese Möglichkeit ergibt, um euer Land zu sehen. Vielen Dank fürs Hören und für Ihre Geduld. Auf Wiedersehen.
So it was the end of keynote speaker Dimitri Terzakis's lecture, let's say. I hope you all enjoy this very intensive and very interesting text. I've enjoyed myself very much. And I will leave the floor to the chair of this coming session, Antonios Botanakis, and will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much. We would like to thank at this moment Professor and composer Dr. Dimitri Terzakis, both for his speech presenting a new music, the music of Dimitri Terzakis, but also for the audio material that he provided and shared with us. We would also like to thank Associate Professor Dr. Serjan Yandim Aydin for not only transcripting this text, Professor Terzakis' text, but also for translating it from German to English. Next on, we will begin the afternoon session talks under the general title, Theoretical Connections. Sadly, due to an unfortunate circumstance, Professor Marcos Koulios, faculty member of the Department of Musical Studies of the University of Ioannina, is not able to participate. So we commence with the talk by Dr. Cenk Güray and Dr. Nevin Şahin. The title that we're presenting is titled as The Similarities Between Byzantine and Ottoman Music in Medieval Theories. I would like to take this opportunity and say a few words about our two speakers. Professor Dr. Cenk Güray, his areas of interest include theoretical approaches to makam music and its performance, theory of cycles, and bağlama performance. Currently, he's teaching as a professor of music theory in the Department of Music Theory of Hacettepe University, Ankara State Conservatory. Dr. Güray is also in charge as the vice president of the same conservatory and the director of the Association for Anatolian Music Cultures. Assistant Professor Dr. Nevin Şahin is an assistant professor of music theories at Hacettepe University, Ankara State Conservatory. She completed her PhD in sociology in 2016 upon her research on music and power among performers of Mevlevi music. She worked in several research projects, including a comparative theoretical research on makam music and Byzantine music. From 2018 to 2021, she worked in the Corpus Musicae Ottomanicae team at the Orient Institute in Istanbul. Professor Cenk Güray, Professor Nevin Şahin, please take it away.
I hope you can see our slides. Okay, so Cenk Hocam, you can start whenever you want.
Okay, Nevin, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank to all the people, all the dear colleagues here who put a great effort to make this event possible. We are again very honored to be included in such a wonderful symposium about Byzantine music and art. And special thanks to Serjan Hocam for transcribing and also presenting the Professor Terzakis' talk and also translating it into English. And we could understand much more better this way. This was a really wonderful talk. So thank you, Serjan Hocam. Thank you, Professor Terzakis. And our aspect, in fact, is very deeply related with the works of Marcos Koulios. Unfortunately, he couldn't appear today, but again, I would like to thank him for especially for some of his studies that had enlightened our aspect about the collaboration or the interactions between Byzantine music and Ottoman music, let's say, during the medieval ages. We are co-authors of a project with dear Marcos Skolis and with dear Thomas Apostopoulos. With the great efforts of Kyriakos Kalatsidis, they had written 4 chapters on a book named Makam Tradition in Anatolia and the Neighboring Geographies, Makam Atlas in Anatolia and the neighboring geographies. So I think this will be the broadest publication about Byzantine music theory in Turkey, if I'm not wrong. So we are very happy and honored to be included in such a project, together with these valuable academicians, of course. We are editing this project with dear Murat Salim, Professor Dr. Murat Salim Tokaç, and Nevin is also a co-author of the project, and also a very important academician who put a great effort in the editing work too. So thank you, Nevin. And so I will talk a bit about some of the details that I had come across during my studies on this book, especially during my studies on the chapters written by Apostopoulos and Skolis. So I will give some small details that should be deepened much more to see about the medieval interactions between these 2 great theories, Byzantine theory and Turkish music theory. As we have talked before in our previous meetings, Anatolia is really a cradle also for not only for music, but also music theory. So we can find the oldest text about the music theory in Anatolia and the neighboring geographies. So Mesopotamian text, ancient Greek text, and also after that the Byzantine text had brought a great value to the area of music theory. And of course, these texts had affected the later texts that are belonging to the Selçuk period, belonging to the Ottoman period, and belonging to the early Republic and afterwards. But of course, today we will concentrate on some possible relations between these 2 main theory streams during the medieval ages. What I was concentrated on was the concepts of echo and tropos. In fact, at the older theory books, the makam structures, the mode structures, how we can call them, are called tropos. In fact, as you know, tropos means cycling, something cycling is a tropos-based activity. And it is very interesting that starting with the old Mesopotamian music theory, the scales and the makam structures are always being told taking this circular effect into account. And mostly they are drawing some circular pictures on the theory books, and they are putting the sounds around them to indicate about this circular melodic movements. So this tropos, in fact, is a synonym with the laterly used concept to discuss about makams. What is that? Devir. It meaning cycles or cycle. And edvar is the plural of it and means circles or cycles. So, in fact, this concept has never changed during the Byzantine period, ancient Greek period, starting with ancient Greek period, and the Byzantine period, and the Ottoman period. Always these makam structures are transferred in a circular point of view. And these cyclic movements for melodic structures were also theorizing and symbolizing what we call the harmony or the harmonies, which are the main makam structures, which can be defined as the main makam structures in ancient Greek music. And of course, this circular definition does not only signify to a geometrical shape. This circle also signifies a symbolism for the cosmos too. So with this circular way of definition, many cosmological symbols enter the music theory. Just as the tetrachord, four sounds uniting with the four main elements that created everything in the world, every living and non-living creature in the world, and three symbolism going to Holy Trinity and many other things, the inner nature of mankind, which is also three, and also the strings of the lyre, for example, the seven strings symbolizing the seven planets in the solar system. So we have many symbolic similarities between the cosmological perception of the humans and the musical concepts. And taking also this into mind, we should maybe check a little bit on the formation of the makam structures or the echos or the tropos in the ancient Greek theory and then the Byzantine theory. So we can skip maybe. This is the greater perfect system. The main sound system, the main pitch system, how we can call it, the main pitch system of the ancient Greek theory. Also, the Byzantine theory depends on this system too. In fact, in the base of this system, the sound groups of four appear. So we have here four tetrachords. So four groups of sounds, which each of them are also has four sounds. So as a total, maybe 15 sounds, because some of these tetrachords share their borders. In fact, this symbolism of four comes from a four-string lyre. So all this model depends in a minimum way to a four-string lyre. Also, there are interesting details in the expression of this sound system too. For example, let's check the names. For example, let's take the lower tetrachord, which is hepaton tetrachord, and the lowest sound of this tetrachord is hypate-hypaton, which means the lowest sound, in fact. And paripate is the sound near the lowest one. And likanos means the sound or the string played by the forefinger. So this finger, we call it işaret parmağı. And after that, the next tetrachord starts, which is the Meson Tetrachord, just lying at the center near. So if we suppose that, if we assume that the starting string of the lyre is played by our thumb, which is a very natural technique in harp performance, so this is used for the third string. So there is a relation between 1 and the 3. So the first string and the third string are connected to each other with these two fingers. And then the fourth string should be played with this finger. So this also brings out a relation between the 1 and the first and the fourth strings. So in the theory, there are some definitions that are pushing us to think about the possible lyre performance positions and the possible sound organizations, or the melodies coming out there. So as believed generally, the ancient Greek theory doesn't only tell about a static scale details, doesn't statically tell about scales only, but also gives some very important clues about the melodic formations. Why I am telling this? Because Byzantine theory has some more improved forms of these melodic formations. For example, today Antonios had concentrated on a very important topic. What is that? Thesis. I'm sorry if I am pronouncing it wrongly, dear Antonios and dear Greek friends, but these are melodic formulas. Melodic formulas that are telling about a possible echo or a tropos, or how can we call it? These concepts are being changed during different periods. In the older texts, they are called generally as tropos. After that, echoes in especially the middle or later Byzantine theoric texts. And these harmonia-like concepts are coinciding with some special kinds of makam structures or echo structures. So let's continue with this concept. And now we saw what is a greater perfect system is. And in this greater perfect system, the minimal component is a tetrachord. And usually in most of the texts, this minimal tetrachord is symbolized with a diatonic tetrachord, and usually a tense diatonic tetrachord. What is this tense diatonic tetrachord? It starts with a half tone, semitone, and goes with a full tone and ends up with a full tone. So semitone, tone, tone. 1/2 plus 1 plus 1. This is the general formula of a tense diatonic tetrachord, which is firstly given by Aristophanes. So, if you are trying to make a tropos, you add up 2 tetrachords together and make up 8 sounds, a scale of 8 sounds. And there are, of course, some hidden melodic lines too in this scale. But let's just talk about the scale. We should have 8 notes, an octave, and we are starting with a tetrachord, diatonic tetrachord, and we are adding another tense diatonic tetrachord to it. So let's come a bit back, Nevin. 1 page back, please. So if we start this tetrachord through the string of hypate hypaton, and just put a tetrachord, tense diatonic tetrachord on it, and on the point it finishes, we add a second tense diatonic tetrachord, and let's see what happens. Please, one forward, David. Here is the formula: 1/2, 1, 1, 1/2, 1, 1, 1. At the end, you end the tone again, a full tone, because you need 8 sounds and 7 intervals to make an octave, and you add up 2 tetrachords in an adjunct way. So you need 1 more interval. So you add a tone at the end of these 7 sounds. What is this scale called, or what is this tropos called? It is mixolydian. Most probably it was, they say that in Greek mythology, they say that it was invented by Terpandros, a poet and a musician from Midilli. Lesbos. Antonios will know much better. And they say that he invented it. First he invented the 7th string lira, and from the 7th string lira, he invented Mixolydian scale. They say so. I don't know exactly. And this is the Mixolydian. Now, a very easy mathematics. If we start not with hypate hypaton, but the next string, paripate hypaton. So the first interval is not 1/2, it will be 1. 1, 1, 1/2, 1, 1, 1, and at the end, add another 1/2. This is Lydian. If we continue this sequence, for example, if we start with Lykonos hypaton and follow the same road, we observe Phrygian. Start with the next string and handle Dorian. And after that, next string becomes Hippolydian, next string becomes Hippophrygian, next string becomes Hippodorian. So we have the main 7 tropos of the ancient Greek theory. Also, the medieval Byzantine theory. In the early medieval texts, we have 7 main makams. After this age, it started to be adding up to 8 because of the cycle again. You are returning to the first makam, and first is equal to 8. And this symbolism is also a very critical Christianity symbolism, the coming of the Jesus Christ to the world and coming back again near the God. 1 and 8 symbolizes these 2 critical events. So because of that, the symbolism followed an 8 tropos or 8 echos order, and all the, as far as I know, I am much more engaged in Eastern Christianity. In all the churches, we have this 8 echo symbolism that are being used in the liturgic cycles. And this is okay. And of course, this makam definition also has some numerical and mathematical relations with each other, because they are all belonging to the Pythagoras logic. Everything is mathematics. And all these tetrachords and other sounds are related with each other in a mathematical way too. For example, Lydian and Hippolydian are having a 4th distance, 4 sounds distance between them. And these 4ths, 5ths as a very critical effect in the formation of these makams. And again, I had observed from Schoolis texts, he is telling about the wheel of Theon of Smyrna from Izmir, a theorist, Theon, and philosopher, and he again put a circle, and at around the circle he put some notes identifying these sounds of the lyra, and between these sounds he put some numbers, 4/5, 2/3. All of them are coinciding with very critical mathematical relations and also very critical relations of harmony. 2/3 is a 5th. 3/4 is a 4th. 1/2 is a octave, something like so. All these theoretical facts are also depending on a very critical mathematical background. So let's skip to the next age. 9th century. Probably very similar times we are discussing. There's Byzantine theory going out, a very great stream, and Islamic music theory, medieval Islamic period music theory, let's say. And İbnül Müneccim Please check the tetrachords. They are formed in an identical way to the ancient Greek way of forming the Lydian, Phrygian, and other scales in a sequence. Starting from a sound, please check the first scale. Let's check the first scale. It starts from a G, a Sol, a Rust, whatever it is, and 3 is the same scale starting from A, La, or Dügen. And mutlak fi mecratul vusta and sebabe fi mecratul vusta. What is mutlak? Is the empty string there. You do not use any fingers. It is an oud now. The theory instrument is an oud. And mutlak symbolizes an empty string. You do not press anything on the string. And after this, taking this lowest sound of the string, you are using your fingers, just as the ancient Greek theory. And this forefinger again comes out as sebabe. And it just symbolizes a similar relation between the empty sound or the lowest empty string or the lowest string in the lira. So a very similar symbolism and also a very similar instrument positioning that are lying behind the theory. Let's skip Nevin. And from my book, it was 10 years ago that I have written the book, and I should be honest that I wasn't aware of such details. Now I can see that there are very shocking details. And please check how Safiyuddin Urmevi is the main theoretician of the all Islamic music theory. Also, he is the father of the Anatolian music theory. Safiyuddin Urmevi, very important person. Please look how he tells about the similar makams. Ushak starts with an A in the Arabic alphabet, abjad notation, and Neva starts in the second position, and Buselik starts in the third position. So just like the first string in the lira, the first position in the oud, and the first position in any sound system. So they are collecting the makams, sharing the similar sound system together, a similar lira accord, a similar position in oud, or a similar collection of sounds having the same intervals between them. And they are defining the makams that are coming out these intervals in the same sequence. If you start from the first string, first sound, you have Ushak. Start with the second one, you have Neva. Start with the third, you have Buselik. Let us skip Neva. So I think it was your part, maybe. Am I continuing it?
Maybe we can skip this part because we are already
going
over our time.
I am talking too much sometimes, sorry for that. Let's skip this part. I think maybe you can take it, Nevin, if you like.
Actually, I was going to take after this slide or the other slide, but you already talked about the relationship of 7 and 8.
I have taken your part too.
So I'm continuing, I guess.
Please.
Yeah, Cenk Hoca already told about the relationship between cosmology and the musical intervals. So, and he also mentioned there are resemblances of this numeric symbolism in the Eastern Church. So this slide can be reinterpreted as a summary of what Cenk Hoca told so far. And from the cyclic understanding of starting from 1 and returning to 1, we can conclude that the numeric symbolism of 7 relates closely to the numeric representation of 8. Let me continue from this slide. And we also can talk about the importance of the four elements, which Cenk Hoca already mentioned. And we can find the connection of the four elements and music, which was first referred to by Zosimus the alchemists in the 4th century. And I must confess that still we are teaching Turkish makam music within tetrachords, depending on this understanding of four elements. So let me continue. And the relationship of cosmology and music theory, as mentioned in the medieval Byzantine sources, we can observe this in medieval Islamic sources as well. The 7 celestial bodies, I mean the planets in the solar system, are represented as 7 avaze in the theory. The circular movement is resembling the circular movement of planets, and also the relationship with melodic intervals to the horoscope is really quite significant. I will show a really interesting ramification in the 21st century in the next slides. And the four elements come up in the medieval Islamic theory as the 4 shube. Here you can see the representation of zodiac signs and the relationship of different intervals music depending on the particular days of the Muharrem month. These are taken from the Kırşehir Edvar, which is a 15th century Islamic manuscript. Since we are really over our time, I need to skip this part really quickly. Coming back to Safiuddin, we already showed some detailed circular structures from his work, but let me talk about this image from the facsimile as well. Here you can see how he explains the relationship of intervals and different makams in his manuscript on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, interesting enough, I found this on YouTube in a video explaining ancient Greek modes. And the representation is quite similar, like a star with 7 lines. Here you can see the Greek modes, and next to each mode you can see the day of the week and the horoscope sign. So the relationship is still explained through these cosmological connections and the numeric symbolism. We can refer to medieval sources both in Byzantine and Islamic spheres by telling that they are not giving scale representations, but rather they talk about ratios. And those ratios relate to melodic formulas. Cenk Hoca already mentioned this part, so I'm trying to speed up in an effort not to take the time of other speakers. The melodic formula we observe in the Byzantine sources from the 12th to the 15th century are similarly appearing in Islamic sources from the 11th to the 14th century. And we always come across this circular movement starting from the beginning and returning to the beginning and meeting different melodic structures within the circle. When we continue in the historical timeline, we can still see the connection of this theoretical resemblances, and not only in theory, also in performance. I only took one concept from performance from the post-medieval period, I can say. There is terirem in the Byzantine music performance, which has the rhythmic connections of melody with sung meaningless words like terirem, and a very similar performative tradition occurs in the Ottoman Turkish makam music tradition, which is named terennüm. Even the words are quite similar to each other, and the performances are quite similar to each other as well. If we come to the conclusion, I need to mention that this presentation should be interpreted as a preliminary presentation of the connections between two medieval theories. And we believe that the medieval sources should be analyzed in a parallel way. I mean, we know much about medieval Islamic manuscripts, we know much about Byzantine medieval manuscripts, but we know very little about the connections between those different theoretical traditions. If we keep up working comparatively among these manuscripts, we believe we can come across further connections and further similarities. As Cenk Hoca mentioned at the very beginning, the Atlas of Makam Music in Anatolia and the neighboring geographies is coming out soon, which includes the articles by Marcos Kylios, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, Professor Thomas Apostolopoulos and Dr. Kyriakos Kalaitsidis. Their works are quite significant in understanding the Byzantine theory, and we would like to thank them when finishing our presentation. Without their work, we wouldn't be able to build up our comparative approach, and we really look forward to seeing further research on the comparative study of Byzantine manuscripts and Ottoman manuscripts. Thank you so much for your attention.
Dear Dr. Yurey, dear Dr. Şehin, thank you very much for the very informative presentations on the similarities between Byzantine and Ottoman music in medieval theories. I am pretty certain that we will have several questions from our audience following the three sessions that we'll present today. Next on, Professor Chardeakis will present his paper titled Ottoman Melodies Written Down Through Byzantine Notation, an example from Peter Byzantios. Professor Chardeakis teaches Byzantine musicology and Celtic art at the Department of Music Studies of the School of Philosophy on the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. He teaches on both undergraduate and postgraduate level at the university, but also at other universities and institutes. His published scientific work comprises more than 200 studies, monographs, articles, entries in encyclopedias, papers in conferences, essays in various collective volumes, scientific reviews, etc., mostly on various subjects, theoretical, historical, aesthetical, etc., pertaining to the field of Byzantine musicology and Celtic art. He participates in conferences both in Greece and abroad, and is a member of the scientific and organizing committee in most of them. He is also an active member of various international scientific societies whose activities are focused on Byzantine musicological studies. At the same time, he is a director of an artistic group of international renown, the choir, the Maestros of the Celtic Art. With this choir, he has given, up to the present day, more than 400 performances in Europe, Asia, America, and Australia, and has appeared in radio and TV shows in Greece and abroad. He also is an internationally recognized chanter, an artist performer of Byzantine music, and he has recorded alone or with various ensembles offered under his own direction Byzantine hymns. Several of them were discovered by himself in the frame of his parallel academic research, or even musical examples of secular or folk songs and composition of contemporary music as well. His whole activity as an internationally recognized musician in his twofold quality, both as a scientific researcher and university professor, and as an artist, interpreter, and director of musical ensembles, explores new paths towards a global, multifaceted, and innovative approach to Byzantine musicology and Celtic art. Professor Chardeakis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adonis. I hope that you can see my screen. Okay, dear colleagues, it is very well known that lots of Ottoman melodies, melodies of every type, form, and style, have been written down through Byzantine notation. This paper is focusing rather on practical than on theoretical aspects of the issue. An Ottoman melody written down by a great Byzantine music personality, Peter Byzantios, is going to be examined as far as paleographical and musicological criteria are concerned. The final effort deals with the ability to decode, understand, and of course perform the music of the above-mentioned melody. A very interesting and in most cases unknown melodic material is hidden underneath the symbolic pneumatic Byzantine notation. Such an effort to discover it is undoubtedly a new challenge through which both the notated documents and the living tradition of Ottoman Turkish music can be understood. I would like to immediately move on with a musical example under discussion that is a melody written down by the Saint Peter, the so-called Byzantios. There is a manuscript written by his hands at around the end of the 18th century, a manuscript found at Konstantinos Psaphos' collection under the number 19/173, kept now at the Department of Music Studies of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, a manuscript that contains Greek and Turkish folk songs and melodies. The musical example under discussion is randomly chosen among the songs found in the aforementioned codex. It is a Turkish folk song, a sarki, especially a sarki composed in Rehavi Makam, according to Sufyan Usul, written in the folio 151 recto verso of the Saint Codex. I would like to approach and try to decode the melody written down in this manuscript according to the following methodology and technique. First of all, you can see a facsimile of Peter the Byzantios' manuscript where mentioned melody is written down. Consequently, one can also see a typographical transcription of the same melody. Let's comment on the structure of this specific melody. The sarki has obviously 4 couples written down identically. That way, you can see first, second, third, and fourth couple. That is an identical melody. There is also a refrain of the song written down once. This is the refrain of the song. But it's noteworthy that one could observe a kind of connection between each one couple and the common refrain. That is the final musical and, of course, poetical phrase of the song, percheti parti, a phrase that seems to be a four-clause preludio that drives us harmoniously from the end of the couple to the beginning of the refrain. This is the place where the end of the couple meets the beginning of the refrain through this phrase, percheti parti, marked through red lines. In my opinion, additionally, in those 2 bars of the couple cadence of this specific song, the tempo of the sarki is hidden. In my opinion, it's about a tempo formed like that. This is the way this specific melody is written down through Byzantine notation. Below is a transcription of this melody into the contemporary new method of the Byzantine notation, and underneath a transcription into the staff notation. The melody and at the same time the tempo of this sarki is formed like that. Percheti parti, percheti parti. I shall move on to some comments on notation analysis. Without any doubt, one could say that the type of notation used in this specific record, even it is written at around 1800, i.e. 15 years before the use of the nowadays used analytical type of the Byzantine notation. One could say that the type of this notation, I repeat, is a very analytical one. If one follows every sign used in this record, they easily could conclude to the final melody of the song. See below a correspondence of the prototype source to the exegesite melody. We can follow the melody written down phrase by phrase. For example, first phrase. Second. Asli. Third. Yasli. And fourth. Shirma. And so on. One can follow a same correspondence for the rest part of the entire melody. It's of crucial importance to note here some repetitive motifs of the melody. They are very important as far as the structure of the melody are concerned. You can see those repetitive motifs marked through several colors, and one can recognize the very same melody hidden underneath these records of the specific part of the melodies marked here. For example, here in this red circle, Asli is the same with the other marked red circle, Shirma, and so on. Let's see some remarks on the used voiceless neumes and their role in the performative perspective. In this specific song, one could point out the use of 3 voiceless signs, the so-called homalon, another one called parakalesma, and a third one called ligisma. Those parts of the melodies formed under the power of these specific voiceless signs, could drive the performer to the same melody. In any case, one can see those voiceless signs at the score. Some remarks on the used poetic text. It is so important to note that poetic text of the song is a bilingual one. It's a text given in both Turkish, the couples, and Italian, the refrain languages. First couple, given in Turkish language, as well as second and third and fourth, but the refrain is given in Italian language. As far as I know, the phenomenon isn't so common or usual in Ottoman music practice of that period. Additionally, it's so interesting to investigate any differentiation regarding music or performative style between the Turkish couples and the Italian refrain. But in my opinion, melody written down in our manuscript doesn't give us such a clue. Let's go on with the rhythmic aspects. Sarki, the Sarkiade discussion is composed according to Sofyan usul. The usul, consisted of 4 beats in every bar, is developed smoothly and normally. Additionally, it has to be noted that the powerful parts of some beats are here marked with a sign of the so-called gorgon. You can see those parts of the melody signed by the specific sign called gorgon in your screen. This sign, the so-called gorgon, is usually written on the top of the relevant voice sign. I repeat, the powerful parts of some beats. And finally, I shall conclude with some remarks on the exegesis, on the effort of the exegesis of the melody, an exegesis according to both Byzantine and staff notation. What follows is an overview of the entire song, an overview that includes every aspect of the sarki, i.e. the music in its prototype and the correspondence analysis, structure, lyrics in their prototype and the correspondence translation, as well as a transcription of the final music into staff notation according to the typical Turkish system. This is an overview of the entire song that, I repeat, includes the score, the original score, the transcriptions, the lyrics, and everything regarding this specific song. Additionally, this is specifically the score of the same sarki written down in nowadays in use Byzantine notation. This is the same song transcribed by me into the modern Byzantine notation, the one that we usually call the new method of the analytical notation. This is an exegesis, as we described this phenomenon in Greece, an exegesis of the original melody written down by the hands of Peter the Byzantius. And here, one can additionally see same melody written down in staff notation according to nowadays in use Turkish notation system. This is a transcription into the staff notation of the same melody after the previous exegesis I mentioned before. Finally, I conclude with a rough record of the melody. It's a record made in my place with my daughter, Evangelia Chaldeaki, playing the bedir and singing the couples of the sarki, a PhD student of mine, Gerasimos Papadopoulos, playing the oud, and me joined them to the refrain of the same sarki. So please listen to this rough record of the specific melody. Are you here? Okay.
Yes, perfectly clear. Yes, thank you.
Non nel mondo
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Cordex. Thank you very much for your really interesting and detailed paper examining the Ottoman melodies written down through Byzantine notation. Also, we have to thank you for the wonderful audio example you shared with us based on your transcription and exegesis on the original composition by Peter Byzantios. Next on, we shall continue with the talk Dr. Panagiotis Lig. Dr. Lig is an assistant professor of ethnomusicology at Florida State University, where he teaches a variety of courses and directs performance ensembles focusing on Brazilian and Greek music. He holds a PhD in ethnomusicology from Harvard University with a thesis on musical practices and personhood in the Anatolian Greek migrant community. His research interests include music, dance, and oral poetry in insular Greece, particularly Crete and Kalymnos, northeastern Brazil, Ireland, and their diasporas. From 2017 to 2019, he served as a postdoctoral fellow at the Milnampari Collection of Oral Literature, managing the digitization and cataloging of James Notopoulos field recordings from his 1952 to 1953 trip to Greece and Cyprus. He plays Greek, Brazilian, and Irish music on various stringed instruments, the tonic baton accordion, percussion, and the chambuna bagpipe, and frequently performs and records throughout the Americas and Europe. Professor Lig will present his paper titled Sadakat and Paradigmatic Notation in Konstantinos and Kiraglioglu Collection. Professor Lig, the floor is yours.
Please open your microphone.
Professor Lig, we cannot hear you. Please open your, thank you.
There we are. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try again. Merhaba, arkadaşlar. Kalispera Fili ke sinaderfi. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I wish that we could all be in person, and apologies for not being able to attend more of this wonderful symposium. But as we all know, life does what it wants. So I'll just share my screen if I may. Can everyone see this? Yes? Great.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to present this collection of thoughts, which I'm calling Sadakat and Paradigmatic Notation in the Konstantinos Nicolaou Kyriakoglou collection. So I have a few points that I want to make here. One is perhaps the most important thing that I'm going to say is just to alert you all to the existence of this wonderful collection of music, which I'll talk about in a little bit of detail, and then present a few of my thoughts about its significance in terms of the legacy of performance practice in the late Ottoman world, in a place that we don't normally consider as a center of composition, recomposition, and practice in Ottoman music. But the evidence is increasingly suggesting that that certainly was the case. I'm speaking of the island of Lesbos, Midili, right across the strait from Ayvalık or Ayvali, which, as everyone may know, has long had a very important, very robust musical tradition of all kinds. We know from the historical record, from literature, for example, the novels of Stratismiri Vilis, who was from northeastern Lesbos, and from photographs such as these, that for a very long time, this island has had a tremendously cosmopolitan musical culture, which makes perfect sense, being one of the largest, most commercially and culturally important places in, I suppose, what we could call the not quite the hinterland, but perhaps the second or third tier of late Ottoman social life. We're going to be focusing during this presentation on the life work of a very important but hitherto relatively unknown musician named Konstantinos Kyriakoglou, who was born in 1888 in the village of Kapi in northeastern Lesbos. If those of you who have visited Lesbos, probably, if you've not been to Kapi, you've probably been to Mandamados, which is where the large monastery of the Archangel Michael is located. Kapi is just a few miles down the road, a few kilometers down the road from there. Very close to Ayvali, you can see the lights of Ayvali winking on and off as dusk or dawn approaches. Kyriakoglou was born, as I said, in 1888 to a relatively middle-class family that was involved in local agriculture, as well as quite robust trade with the Greek community across the water in Ayvali. And when he and his brother were teenagers, their father sent them to Izmir, to Smyrni, to study at a Greek-run conservatory. They both studied Western music, notation, theory, various instruments such as brass instruments and piano and violin, which is very typical of that part of the island at the time. These mixed orchestras of, as you saw in the first photo, and as we'll see again, of cornet, valve trombone, saduri, the hammered dulcimer, and violin. They also studied Ottoman music theory and practice and performance, which, as family history and various documents have shown, was the standard in this village and a lot of the towns in that part of Lesbos in the late 19th century. So they had a family orchestra that performed all over the island and all over the Balkans. We have records of his meticulous ledger books detailing how much money they were paid for playing, for example, at a baptism outside of Thessaloniki, and at the wedding of an important Turkish authority outside of Ayvalık, this kind of thing. So we'll dig into a few of the musical details of this collection, which I think are quite fascinating and really elucidate the musical life of this place in the late Ottoman milieu. And I want to do this by, as the title of my presentation suggests, considering this term, sadakat, which those of you who really speak Turkish, which I don't, know means various things, but I'm going to, after Cem Behar, I'm going to think about this. I invite you to think about this term as faithfulness, in the musical context, faithfulness to a particular genealogy of style, of performance, and of interpretation of music through a repeated process of imitation and repetition. So we often, scholars of Ottoman music, as you all know, talk about this idea of sadakat in terms of the meshed relationship of mentor and pupil, of chains of practice, of schools of performance and interpretation and style. I'm also going to suggest that we enrich this concept in this particular case by thinking about a few other terms, such as mimesis, and I mean this in the, I suppose, the Aristotelian sense of the performative reenactment of truth values of what a particular culture or a particular group of artists really believe is important about the art that they're practicing. Also, Georgina Bourne's term musical assemblage, which is the combination of mediations that are characteristic of a particular cultural and historical period. So here we're talking about late 19th, early 20th century Ottoman Lesbos, as well as early 20th century Asia Minor Greek diaspora communities in the United States, which is where Kyriakou wound up, in the Boston area. And finally, I also think that it's useful to think about all of these processes through, again, a term that Georgina Bourne has used, relayed creativity, which she talks about as the recurrent decomposition, composition, and recomposition of musical, expressive, artistic things by a series of agents, but not necessarily taking very seriously, or at least not prioritizing the figure of the composer, the idea that a piece of music is the individual creation of one particular person. Rather, each particular piece of music is but the latest iteration in a chain of recompositions based on a particular embodied style that is regulated by and predicated upon this idea of sadakat, of faithfulness to a lineage of performance practice. Okay, so before I show you a few examples from this collection, I'll talk a tiny bit more about Kyriakou in his life. So Kyriakou was born in this village, Kapi, Lesbos. He and his brother, as I said, Michalis. This is Michalis and this is Konstantinos. They spent several years as teenagers and young adults in Izmir studying all kinds of music. They worked professionally, like I said, all over the Balkans, all over the northeastern Aegean islands and the Aegean coast of Anatolia. And in about 1917, a few years before the Second Greco-Turkish War, Kyriakou and his entire orchestra, these dapper, well-dressed fellows right here, emigrated rather from Lesbos to Lynn, Massachusetts, which is just to the north of Boston. At the time, in the first couple of decades of the 20th century, and then particularly after the events of 1921-22, the Boston area received a tremendous amount of migrants and refugees, primarily Greeks and Armenians, from the Aegean coast of Anatolia. And there were so many people from Lesbos that, as you can see from this photo right here of the Lesbian Society, the Sappho Society annual picnic right outside of Boston in 1926, a tremendous amount of different musical traditions are represented here. We have a lauto, the long-necked steel string lute. There's an oud in this picture, but I couldn't fit. It's one of those giant panoramic photos where they had, everybody had to stay still for about 45 seconds. And there's the same guy on each end because the exposure time was so long, he could run from one side to the other before the photo was finished. But we see, of course, the valve trombone. There are mandolins and banjos and all kinds of other things in this photo, just this one photo. So we get a sense of the tremendously cosmopolitan musical life that these people brought with them to Boston. And family history, as I said, in the Kyriakou family, who, by the way, today continue to perform Asia Minor music on both sides of the Atlantic, both in Lesbos and in the Boston area. Their family lore has informed me that this orchestra, after moving to Lesbos, from Lesbos to Boston in roughly 1917, worked very consistently for about 15 years until the early 1930s throughout the post-Ottoman diaspora populations of the Boston area. So for Greeks, Armenians, the small Turkish population, Sephardic Jews, and others. So onto the collection itself. This is the cover of the collection that was presented to me by Kyriakou's grandson, who himself is a very fine guitarist and percussionist. As you can see, this tome, which was compiled in, as we'll see, 1906 was when Kyriakou dated his his first completed version. There are two books, one of which he completed before he left for America, the other of which he created and continued to add to over the next few decades. But as you'll see, it's lovingly wrapped in aluminum foil with this note saying, "Keep for family history," written by Konstantinos Kyriakoglou before 1910. Born 1888, Kapi Mytilini, Greece. Music for violin, trumpet, trombone, and bass horn, or euphonium. Given to me by him to continue in our history. This is written by Konstantinos' son, Niki, who is a very fine pianist. So the contents of the collection are as follows. They're roughly split in thirds between Greek identified music, which is for the most part not traditional, not folk music. Rather, it is almost exclusively European style parlor music with Greek lyrics. For example, selections from light operas, Greek translations of popular French songs. There are a few arrangements of Greek folk songs, but they tend to be the ones that at the time were already being arranged by Greek musicians from Athens and Thessaloniki for piano. Songs like Melachri Nomu and these kind of things that Greek audiences know. We also have about a third of the collection that is very clearly, explicitly European music, waltzes, polkas, tangos, the national anthems of all of the European nations who had representatives working in commerce in Smyrni. So for example, the Italian national anthem, the Austrian national anthem, the British national anthem, the French national anthem, these kinds of things, which is a clue that he had to play these at different engagements. But then roughly a third of the collection is Ottoman music. Some of the pieces I have dated back to the 17th century. Some of them are 19th century compositions that were contemporaneous to Kyriakoglou's life and musical activity. So I'll just show you some very quick examples. This is one of those light opera pieces from Sakellarides' opera, The Mermaid's Tale. So you can see it's very clearly written in Western staff notation. Here is an example of where he very clearly has copied a printed score, the light song Logia Glika, Sweet Words. He's clearly copied it from this exact piece of print music. But what we're going to be focusing on today is the Ottoman music in the collection. So here's I hope you can see this, it's rather small, but here is a chart of all of the Ottoman compositions that I was able to positively identify by looking in the archives of Harvard University, consulting Turkish friends who are specialists and the like. So there are quite a few of them, and there are a few dozen that I haven't been able to identify. But you can see that it's a pretty large spread through the middle of the 18th century to the early 20th century. So let's look at a few examples just to give you an idea. Here, for example, is the Rast Şarkı by Rifat Bey. It's just a little bit of it. There are a lot of these şarkılar and things like that. Here is an example of the Nihavend Şarkı by, which one is this? This is by Hacı Arif Bey, I think. So you can see that Kyriakoglou has transcribed the Ottoman Turkish lyrics in Greek script, which is something that is very common in his collection. Again, faithfulness to style. Kyriakoglou, like all of his other villagers, was a fluent Turkish speaker, but did not write in Ottoman script. So he, like all of his compatriots, his Greek compatriots from the village, wrote in Greek script. Here is an example of one of the peshrevs that he has transcribed here. This is the Şefk Evza Peshrev by Numan Ağa. And then here we get into what I really want to focus on very briefly and just alert you to. So I was talking about Sadakat before and about relayed creativity. and about paradigmatic notation and all of these kinds of things. By paradigmatic dictation, of course, I mean, after Christian Trollsgaard, this idea from Byzantine music that we can, I think, very much apply to all of the modal Near Eastern systems that use some kind of written notation. Paradigmatic notation being this idea that the score or the notation is simply a roadmap, a guide to tell us what piece we're performing, give us the contours of the melody, give us the important phrases, tell us about the character of the piece, but based on our own, as performers, our own particular genealogy of style, we are free within the conventions of that style to engage in performative recomposition and performance. We all know this very well. This is what we do in our music, be it Greek folk music, be it Ottoman classical music, be it Anatolian folk music. The melody is a roadmap. The melody is a skeleton, and it's our job as performers to interpret it in such a way that we give it flesh, we give it muscle, we give it a nervous system, we turn it into something alive, right? We all know this very well. This is how we do music. Now, that in itself is not anything particularly remarkable, but what is remarkable about the Kyriakoglou collection, aside from the fact that it represents such a wide range of music that clearly was performed by these professional middle-class musicians in this time and place. And I may be wrong, but I do think that this is quite a unique collection in that regard. There is another collection that was written down by one of Kyriakoglou's colleagues and co-islanders, Panagiotis Susamlis, who was a clarinetist, who was born in Izmir but moved as a child, I think, to Lesbos. But that collection is almost exclusively European music. There really isn't any Ottoman music in it. So I think this is a unique document, which, by the way, if anyone's interested, I can make available. We're working on making a website with the entire thing with audio clips and things, but as we all know, that takes a long time and a lot of money. So if anyone wants to get a PDF of this entire collection, it's roughly 250 pieces or something like that, or 250 pages rather. You can email me and I'll be delighted to send it to you, because we need more people studying this stuff. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so onto paradigmatic notation and sadakat. So the most compelling evidence that I've found in this collection for Kyriakoglou's own creative process and his own conception of what he was doing with this collection is in the fact that there are several pieces in the Ottoman repertoire that he notates more than once. And they're almost always right next to each other. They're only separated by a few pages. So we're going to talk just for 2 minutes before I finish about this particular piece. What this means is the Konstantinos Nicolaou Kyriakoglou collection, book 1, page 23. So book 1, page 23, we have the Ushak Peshrev by Tanburi Buyuk Osman Bey. But then only 6 pages later, on page 29, we have the exact same composition. It's clearly the same composition. Kyriakoglou never, ever, ever gives the name of the author. It's clearly not important to him. In this entire collection, no composer is ever named, even though many of these pieces, he absolutely would have known who composed it, because he was part of this robust tradition. But he doesn't even do it for the Greek pieces that he copies from printed sheet music. So clearly, he's not interested in the figure of the composer. He's much more interested in his own creative activity. Now, what's fascinating to me about these repeated transcriptions or notations, or whatever we want to call them, is that they are not repeated. They're clearly the same piece of music, but if you look, even without taking the time to listen to this Peshrev, which we don't have time to, as we know, Peshrevs go on for quite some time. You can see very clearly that this is the same composition. That first opening phrase, and then in the second one, da ram ram ba di da la di da boom dum, right? And it continues very clearly. The Ushak Peshrev by Tanburi Buyuk Osmanbey. What's fascinating is that in all of these doubled composition, these transcriptions, there is almost no identical phrase. In fact, in this transcription right here, there's only one, and I've highlighted it here in red. This measure right here is the only measure, the only phrase in this this transcription, this notation rather, I should say. I keep saying transcription, but that actually goes against my point. It's a notation, an imaginative notation of two very distinct performances of this same piece. But they're performances that are happening on ink and paper. And it's really fascinating to me. And so there are many, many, many examples of this in the collection. But I think, as I said at the outset, I think this is evidence of a number of things. One, it's very strong evidence for this idea of faithfulness to a particular style of performance, but also faithfulness to this ideal, this mimetic recompositional ideal of never interpreting the same core melody, the same melodic entity the same way twice. And it's really this enduring mystery for me that Kyriakoglu did this way. It's quite extraordinary. And I know of no other examples of this kind of very detailed, explicitly performative, individualized recomposition on the page of a piece of music in this style. And the last thing I'll say is that it's very clear that this is not the type of transcription that, for example, if you go to Meson.com and look at these kind of, lead sheets, as they would say in American jazz, of Ottoman music, that's clearly a skeleton. That's clearly a skeleton that the person notating it is providing for us to use as a springboard for personal creativity. This is something very different here. Here we're looking at that personalized creativity being enacted, recomposed on the page. And so I would just conclude by saying I think this is a very exciting document that is long overdue to be part of our conversations, and I welcome any ideas and any feedback. So, teşekkürler and efcharisto.
Professor Lig, thank you very much for your illuminating talk on the Sadekaten paradigmatic notation in Konstantinos Kyriakoglu collection. It was really nice and really interesting to find a musical passage that is being repeated on different pages and on different music scores. At this point, I would like to invite our audience to address their questions to the speakers via the chat interface. Unfortunately, Professor Hardeakis won't be with us during the Q&A session due to prior commitments. So feel free to address your question to the remaining speakers, Dr. Guray, Dr. Shaheen, and Dr. Link. Thank you. If I may begin, I have a question for Professor Lig, sorry. It's from Vedat Yildirim that says, I want to ask a question. Did Kyriakoglu use more than one different sharp and flat symbols by writing Ottoman music?
Right, thank you very much, Vedat, for that question. I meant to mention this. So no, the answer is no. And this is one of the other things that's very interesting to me. I mean, as you can see, he writes everything in Bola Henk Ney transcription, so it's easy to read on the staff. But he does not use any of the modified sharps or flats, which, as we know, I mean, if he compiled this, he finished the first volume in 1906, the modified flat and sharp system had been in use in print in Ottoman music for a few decades at that point. So he surely would have been aware of it. But he seems to be not interested. And this is, I think, another piece of evidence for this idea of faithfulness to a particular genealogy of performative interpretation. Because the thing he always does he always marks the maqam. And when the piece modulates to a different maqam, he marks the modulation, but he doesn't do it by changing the sharps or flats unless he has to, by which I mean, if it modulates to another maqam in which one of the intervals is changed substantially, then he puts, you know, a flat or a sharp, but he doesn't use the half flats and the half sharps and any of the comma. He doesn't articulate the comma system. So it's very clear to me, it's very clear that he had a very intimate knowledge of this musical system. He knew the repertoire. He clearly was performing for audiences that expected him to know it. And his fellow musicians knew it. On the other hand, they're also playing this music. Well, now we don't have recordings, so I don't know, but he was certainly playing this music with that ensemble. He was playing peshrevs and semais and sharkas with an ensemble of violin, trombone, trumpet, and sanduri, which, and of course, as we know, the sanduri, you can't play the commas. So I don't really know. I mean, we have some recordings from lesbian musicians and musicians from nearby Lesbos who are part of the same musical culture. We have some early 20th century recordings from them, and it's in the middle, right? It's, you know, the violin, the clarinet, the trombone, they're going to play some of the intervals, but the saduri can't do it. The guitar can't do it. The guitar wasn't really in use in Lesbos at the beginning of the 20th century very widely, but mandolins were. We don't know. We don't really have recordings, so I'm not really sure, but I suspect that probably what they did is akin to what Greek folk musicians do these days, which you just do it a little bit to signal if the melody's ascending or descending. You give it color. So it's another mystery that I think is somewhere between a mystery and a clue. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Professor Lik, for your answer. I see that Dr. Said has a question for you.
Thank you. I would first like to thank all the speakers, because this session appeared to become even more interesting than I was imagining it to be. We started from the early medieval times and we came up to the 19th century. We have seen many different connections in between the theory and performance, and going across the ocean to see what's going on the other side of the world. I mean, this is really very exciting, and I would like to thank all the contributors of this session. Actually, I had one question for Professor Haldiakis as well, but since unfortunately he's not here, let me direct my question to Panayotis instead, because the questions are actually on the same line. I know this is part of a larger work, but I was really curious if you had any chance to check any other concordances of these pieces Kyriakoglu took down, maybe in other notation systems like Hamparsu notation. And I can see that there are some people in the audience from my previous Corpus Musicae Ottomanica project who keep working on the Hamparsu manuscripts. If there are any concordances in any other manuscript or print sources, it would be really interesting to see the similarities and differences. And regarding the previous question, Kyriakoglu's transcriptions reminded me of the Darul Harb publications. They didn't have peculiar sharps and flats for Ottoman intervals, but still they used Western staff notation in a very similar manner. And they had some concordances within the publication series, some with a simpler transcription, some with more melismatic, I can say, transcription with more ornaments. I would really love to hear about any similarities and differences. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. That's such an important question that I have a simple answer for it. No, because I don't know Hamparsu notation, so I don't have access to that stuff, which is one of the reasons why I'm very eager to share this collection in its entirety with our broader community of researchers, because I know that each one of you, each one of us, if you spend some time with this, everyone will come up with their own unique perspectives and ideas and interpretations based on their own knowledge and experience. As is the case for everyone, my knowledge and experience and my my goals and my motivations are very particular to me, and they're very limited, right? So I really do want to make this publicly available. I did, I spent a lot of time in the, oh God, now the name of it is escaping me, but the Ottoman music collection at Harvard University, Chef Kivoth, I think. And I spent many months spending all day sometimes, like just going through thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of both print sources from Ottoman music from the early 20th century, and also a lot of handwritten transcriptions. And I can say that I didn't find anything remotely like the Kyriakoglu transcriptions, in that everything I found were more akin to, like I said, if you go on Meson.com and download, if you want to get together with your friends and play through some, some Ottoman pieces, it's those very stripped down, basic melodic roadmaps, right? Not this very flowery, melismatic, caliphonic, I guess. It reminds me of some of the Byzantine caliphonic repertoire in terms of how florid it is. And so it's another one of the things that I find so fascinating about this collection. I also I read Byzantine notation, but I'm not a scholar of Byzantine music. So I don't know if there are any parallels in, for example, the Efterpi collections and those kind of things. But I don't think so. I think those collections also are skeletons, right? They're just to remind the musician how the melody goes, so that they can do their own thing with it. And as far as I know, up to this point, the Kyriakoglu collection is quite unique in that regard. I hope I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, it can tell us so much about how, it's just sometimes, it's so frustrating sometimes that we can't go back in time and talk to these people and play music with them, or listen to them play, and get to know their world, their creative, emotional, artistic, personal worlds. And that's why this is so exciting to me. It's like a little snapshot that he took for us of his own process. I would have loved to hear how he played it on the violin, because clearly he was a very good musician who knew his music. So
thank you so much. And I want to include the information that I will be volunteering to work on this collection. Please include me on your list.
I will, absolutely. And I should also say, my book that is really about this family has just come out with University of Michigan Press. And academic books are very expensive. So I'm very happy to, if anyone wants me to send them a PDF of the book, I would be delighted to. I can even drop it in the chat here. Just don't tell my publisher. Okay?
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Yes, dear Dr. Aydin, please.
Thank you very much. I want to thank to all the speakers, first of all. Thank you very much. It's really inspiring, and a lot of information, very inspiring. I want to ask a question to Mr. Leek, Mr. Panayotis Leek. It is maybe the same question like Nevin's, but from another direction. According to how the conception of composition within this context, composition not like something fixed. Maybe composition is a joint event, a floating event. It is never finished. It is being continued in time as no end. Maybe especially if other people participate to this event, as if the composition becomes anonymous. A very interesting situation. So, the document you have is very interesting in that perspective.
Yes, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. That's exactly what I mean by invoking Georgina Born's idea of relayed creativity, because it's like whoever the composer is, and clearly, like I keep saying, to me, it's very clear that Kyriakoglu doesn't really care. It's not very important to him who originally made up this melody, right? Because he never gives the authorship. The only time he does is one of his compositions. He wrote like a little march, and he just says, it says something like Konstantinu Kyriakoglu ergo proton. So like ergon proton, like opus 1. It's seemingly his only opus because it's the only one that is in the book. It's just a little kind of military march. But there are pieces in here that it's impossible that he didn't know who wrote it. Like I said, these light opera pieces. My favorite page of the book, which I didn't show to you, has this very involved sharka in Makam Sabah. And then the very bottom, there's the melody of the March of the Toreadors from Bizet's Carmen, the da da da da da da ba ba ba ba, and he just calls it opera. Like just maybe he heard, I don't know. It's very interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think that you're exactly right. And that's what's so fascinating and exciting to me about this. And I wish that, I don't know, I just don't. I hope that we find more like this, because it tells us so much about this. This collection tells us so much about this one particular musician's creative process. And I like I said, I'll if anybody wants, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat if you don't have it otherwise, and I can send you the entirety of the collection. And if you take the time to sit down and sing or play through some of these pieces, especially the ones that you might know, you'll be delighted. You'll be amazed at how inventive and creative and playful they are. I mean, that's the word that always comes into my mind. It's such a playful engagement with this inherited melodic material. And yeah, it's as you said, I mean, I couldn't say this better. It's like the recompositional process never ends. And that's why I'm attracted to the Aristotelian idea of mimesis, right? Because it's like we're constantly reenacting, reinterpreting, recomposing this art form based on these particular values, working under the assumption that it's never finished. Because the next time we come back to it, just like the ancient Greeks did, retelling new versions of their most important myths, right? How many, every time we do it, the social, political, emotional, cultural context of the performance is different necessarily, but it remains a chain, and it remains a link in this unbroken, unbreakable, and unending chain of reinterpretation. So, and that of course is what all of this giant family of music is all about. I mean, that's what the Makam system, that's one of its strengths, and all of its relatives. So, sorry, that's a long-winded, but it's very exciting to me.
Great. We have another question, Dr. Lig. It's from Vedat Ildirim that says, I also wonder that did Kyriakoglu accept the third line of staff as Segiah or Buselik? In his time, most theologians accepted this line as Segiah. Yeah,
I would probably defer to people who are better versed in the historical practice and theory, but I think Segiah. But I'll leave that when you all see the documents and have time to study it. I will let you educate me, because I'm a little I'm not as strong on that era of Ottoman music theory. Ottoman music is not really my area anyway, so I'm always relying on friends and colleagues to correct my assumptions sometimes. But I think Segiah.
Thank you for your answer. Do we have any other questions for speakers? I don't see any.
Somehow I couldn't raise my hand. Can I ask my question here? First of all, I want to thank to Panayotis. Thank you very much, Panayotis. We can talk a lot about this, because all the dynamics between notation and composition and musicianship and different kind of identities. This is extremely interesting. And maybe we are too much seduced with the notation as fixing a composition. This is not fixing. They in a sense, they write to change it, not to freeze the composition. A very interesting practice of composition as well as notation. So, very nice study in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And like, I can't figure out, does anyone know how to put an attachment in the chat? Because I'd like to just send my whole book right now, because the chapter on this collection is like 70 pages long or something. And so I go into great detail about it. And I think I would really appreciate feedback from those of you who know this music better than I do. But I can't really figure out how to put the PDF. So maybe okay, that's okay. I can just forward it to, actually Nevin has a copy. So maybe she can just send it to everyone who's interested. So.
I also have a question to Cenk and Nevin hocalar, if I may, Antonius.
Of course.
This is again a very interesting question that I asked to myself because of several reasons. Because when I read between and music theory and the theoretical perspectives of Islamic authors in the time of Islam, I always had the impression, I'm not a professional in this field, but I always have the impression they make a reference to former periods, sometimes to ancient periods, and that's it. But I mean, from your presentation, I received a very different image, which interested me a lot, as if this is a joint evolution between Greek-speaking authors, Ottoman-speaking Turkish or whatever Jewish, as if a joint evolution of music theory going on in the medieval. Can it be the case? Is that possible? I mean, not one after the other, but more or less together, is my question.
I'm just thinking in a parallel way, Yiğit Hocam. And thank you for this nice question. As far as I am being engaged in these both areas, I can see that, of course, the sites borrow something from each other. But what is coming out is a joint product based on the past experiences and resulting with the current performance area. So sometimes the instruments change, sometimes the performance technique changes, sometimes the sound system changes, sometimes constructing the melodic shape changes, and all of them are relying on a common base, but they are adapting themselves to the current musical scene. So it is a very natural and adjoint way of production. I'm very agree with you because they are sharing the same geography and culture and the same identity, and they are producing music together, in fact. So most probably this is the case because the medieval time Anatolia is a host to many different cultures, and they are living always together. So I think this adjoint way of production is a very right definition for that. Thank you very much.
I want to raise the stakes with a question coming to my mind. I'm considering the Indian theory all the time when we're working comparatively on Turkish and Byzantine theoretical traditions. Even without the geographical connection, I have a feeling like there might be a similar progress in theoretical understandings, but we need to work in more detail and in comparison with other theoretical traditions. And I think we will be able to see really strong similarities between the Indian tradition as well.
Connections with Indian tradition. From Khorasan. Khorasan is the passage point. So we have very close relation with India this way. We have an Indian tariq in Istanbul, you know, in Hindu tekkesi, we call it. We have two tekkes in Istanbul in the name of Indians, Hinduists. So, and they are sometimes kind of an heterodox Islamic tariq, we can call them. And of course, these Timurid times and all these connections with the Khorasan also depends or touches to the Indian tradition. So you are very right.
I see.
Also Pakistan.
I mean, I see an exciting point in this because, especially when it comes to music thought, we think consecutively. I mean, something happens and 300 years, someone take it and continues with that, and then 1,000 years later. However, this is not only unrealistic, but also probably it is not the case. A joint evolution and also not the culture exchange in the daily understanding of the world, but also in the music thought is something really very attractive, scientifically, I mean. Theoretical conceptions and theoretical exchange, a very exciting one. And a big change maybe in our understanding.
The basic meaning of the cycle, in fact, is not only in music. Mainly it is in time. In fact, the real meaning is that the time recreates itself continuously. So it is the basic thought of Byzantine religious side, also the basic thought of all heterodox Islamic belief systems, Bektashi, Alevi, many things, circular time. So music is a very strong example, is a very strong outcome of that, I think, maybe the strongest one. Thank you very much. It was a great point.
Thank you very much. Are there, Dr. Aydin, please.
I am ready. Thank you very much. I thank you all. Thank you too, Antonios, and
thank you.
Great contributions for today. Really great.
Are there any questions? If there aren't any, perhaps we should conclude this first day of the symposium. Thank you all for attending. The first day of strolling through echoes of the past symposium. A huge thanks to our highly esteemed academics who presented and shared their really informative work with us. Closing, I would like to remind you that tomorrow's Friday session will begin at 4 o'clock with a concluding concert scheduled to begin at 7 in the same afternoon. Thank you all very much. I wish you a great afternoon and a great evening.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we get to join each other in person sometime soon. I can't wait to meet all of you and exchange ideas and eat and drink together.
It's hopeful.
Thank you very much.